Epilepsy is a medical condition that produces seizures affecting a variety of mental and physical functions. It's also called seizure disorder. When a person has 2 or more unprovoked seizures, they are considered to have epilepsy. Now, believe it or not, it's estimated that 1 out of every 100 people in the United States have active epilepsy. That's according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Epilepsy affects people of all genders, all races, ethnic backgrounds, and all ages. Seizure symptoms can vary widely. Some people may lose awareness during a seizure, while others don't. Some people stare blankly for a few seconds during a seizure. Others may repeatedly twitch their arms or legs. Those movements are known as convulsions. Hello and welcome to Healthy Connections. I'm Annetta Wilson, your host. Healthy Connections is a show dedicated to exploring a wide variety of topics, from prenatal care to Alzheimer's disease. And we do so with a wide variety of perspectives, from the professionals that help treat the syndromes to everyday people like you and me who may have personal experience dealing with these topics on a first-hand basis. Stay tuned for Healthy Connections. Dr. Dipali Namade is a board-certified neurologist and epileptologist at the Orlando Health Neuroscience Institute. She's here to get our conversation started about epilepsy and some of the misconceptions around it. Thank you, Dr. Namade.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
What is the true definition of epilepsy?
So epilepsy is 2 or more unprovoked seizures 24 hours apart.
Unprovoked. Now, what does that mean?
That means there is no real cause for a seizure. For example, people can have a seizure because of their electrolyte imbalances like low or high sodium, low or high glucose, low or high potassium, magnesium, calcium, you go on. And that can cause a provoked seizure. And once you take out this precipitating factor, then their seizure go away.
And what are the signs? You know, we know the classic may be someone who is having convulsions, but that's not the only sign.
You're very right. So what I call cinema seizure is what everybody's, understanding about seizure is, where the patient falls down or they start, getting stiff and start having, convulsion, they have a tongue bite. It's true that those are generalized tonic-clonic seizures, or the old definition was grand mal seizures, but the symptoms and the signs of seizures or epilepsy depends on which part of the brain the seizure or epilepsy originates from.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what are some of the signs other than a full-blown physical?
So broadly, we can divide them into focal seizures with loss of awareness, as in you don't know what's happening with your surrounding. You are not able to interact with your surrounding. You're awake, your eyes are open, but you're not able to respond, not able to say your name, or not able to answer a question appropriately. So that is loss of awareness. Or some people can have a focal seizure and they will be able to have conversation with their surrounding perfectly fine. But people will notice, some changes in them.
So how do you know? What signs or symptoms should we look for?
Very good question. So sometimes the focal seizure without loss of awareness goes unnoticed, because as a human being, we are very smart at hiding things. But some things with a loss of awareness, or you must have heard a staring spells, where they don't respond, they're
just staring blankly into space.
Exactly.
Okay.
Or they're having, or other word is behavioral arrest.
Behavioral arrest. What does that
As
look
in,
like?
if I'm sitting here, I'm just looking at you and not doing anything. There's no changes in behavior.
Okay. But it's obvious there's a disconnect somewhere.
Exactly. You're not, as a human being, we respond to our surrounding stimuli. So they could be, lip smacking. They could be doing fumbling movements of their hands. They could be laughter. They could be, having a lot of blinking, face going on one side, having facial twitching.
There's so many signs and
Exactly.
seizures. So how do we know what to do?
Yeah, so if you or your loved one don't look the same, there is changes in their behavior, or they are having confusional episodes where they don't know what they did in particular time of the day, you tell them, hey, we had a dinner at that restaurant during this time, and I talked to you about this, and they're like, no, I don't remember that. And if that start happening repeatedly, maybe it's a time to, consult the neurologist and get figured out, is it seizure or not, or is it something else?
So let's talk about the obvious ones. We've heard the things that we're supposed to do, like put something in someone's mouth or try to stop it. Are any of those things valid or even helpful?
No. So let's talk about some seizure misconceptions. Okay, that brings me to a very important topic where I see that this is my bread and butter. I see seizures patients day out and night. And when I talk to my patients, I come across this misunderstanding. So let's talk about the definition of the seizure. I know we went over the definition in the past, but just to reiterate,
Okay.
it's abnormal electrical activity in the brain which causes changes in the behavior.
Okay.
Okay, so it's a electrical problem. Okay, that means, let's say your house had a short circuit, right? Electrical abnormality. So lights are on because the wires are intact, right? Sometimes the wire gets chipped off and it throws like sparks. Those sparks are seizure discharges.
That's the best way I've ever heard anyone describe that.
And if those seizure discharges or those sparks we don't treat, it causes a fire, which is a seizure.
Okay.
Right?
So let's say someone is having a seizure. How do you help them?
Yeah. So first and that brings me to the next thing is these seizures are going to stop on their own, right? When you have fire, it's going to stop on its own. This fire gets prolonged, that's when we call the fire people, right? So more than 5 minutes, if somebody is having a seizure, you need to call 911, or during when the seizure is going on, somebody gets hurt, like they're having fracture, or they got burned, or something which is dangerous, obviously, or they're pregnant, call 911.
Okay.
Other thing is, if they are seizing, do not put a finger or a spoon or a pen or any objects in their mouth. And a lot of people do that thinking that they will swallow their tongue. Tongue is the strongest muscle in your body. It's physically impossible to swallow a tongue.
And that's an old wives' tale that's been around forever.
Yes.
So if you could give people one piece of advice or knowledge that could help, what would you tell somebody?
So if you see somebody having seizure, make sure there is no heavy or sharp objects around them, so that if they fall, they will get hurt. So make sure they are lying down flat on the surface. Make sure you elevate their head. Do not put anything in the mouth. Time the seizure if you can. Sometimes I tell my patient to video record the seizure if you have that, presence of mind. And if it is more than 5 minutes, then call 911.
And it will go away and subside on its own. Now, I had never heard the term epileptologist.
Yeah.
I had never heard that term before. That's a neurologist who specializes in epilepsy.
You're absolutely right. So we do our neurology residency, and after that, a lot of physicians do 1 or 2 or even more years of training in epilepsy. And these are the people who have a super specialization, so-called, how to take care of these patients with epilepsy.
Dr. Damati, thank you for making this so much more clear for all of us, and especially clearing up the misconceptions. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me. One of the goal in life to spread awareness about the seizures and epilepsy, and hopefully prevent something called as a SUDEP, sudden unexpected death in epilepsy. And that can happen because of the lot of people not taking their medication on time, or if they have a big grand mal seizure or generalized tonic-clonic seizure, which can happen if they have more of those during the month, 4 or more, that increases the risk of that. And every year 3,000 people in the United States alone die because of the SUDEP, and that's why we need to create awareness about epilepsy and seizures.
Well, I hope we've gone a long way toward doing that today.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
We'll be back right after this. The Epilepsy Association is dedicated to improving the quality of life for people affected by epilepsy and seizure disorders. And with us now is David Manchon, Executive Director, to explain more about what the association does. Thank you, David, for being here.
Thank you, Netta, for having me.
What does the Epilepsy Association do?
So we are a nonprofit here in Central Florida, and we take care of those who do not have medical care who have seizure disorders or epilepsy. Most of our patients are uninsured and are either unemployed or homeless.
So when they walk through the door or when they're brought into one of your facilities, what's the first thing you do?
We have case managers that will meet with them and determine if they're qualified for services and help them not only determine if they need medical services, but also wraparound services.
Now, what's a wraparound service?
So a lot of times our patients or our clients need more than just medical care. Like I said, they're unemployed or they're homeless or they're food insecure. We'll help them find jobs. We'll help them find that those extra services that they may need to be able to get back into a productive life.
So it's far more comprehensive than just education about epilepsy.
Oh, absolutely. It's education. It's helping with the medical care, but it's also helping an individual learn how to self-manage and self-care.
What's the hardest part about that last part, the self-care piece?
Yeah, so epilepsy is an isolating disease. People drop out of society a lot of times who have seizure disorders, and so all of a sudden it's not just taking care of a seizure disorder, it's taking care of a whole person. So the difficulty becomes making sure they have reliable transportation, that they have a place to stay and live, so have some stability in their life. Seizures can be extremely disruptive in someone's life to the point of if they lose control of managing their epilepsy or their life, everything else falls apart.
How do you work with the medical community with what you do?
So we have doctors and neurologists and epileptologists and clinicians who partner with us and see patients either as a charity or as at a reduced cost. So we run a clinic at our office in Orlando, and we also outsource patient care to doctors and neurologists throughout Central Florida. So we're always looking for medical professionals to partner with organizations to help those in need.
Is there a typical patient or client for you? You know, when you think of someone who has epilepsy, can you paint us a picture of that individual, or does it span all sorts of categories?
Yeah, epilepsy is one of those things that can affect anybody at any age, at any time. Epilepsy affects everyone, and there is no typical in that. In general, younger people and older people will be more affected by seizures.
So
readily.
One end of the spectrum.
On the end of the spectrums, but it can hit anybody at any time. 1 in 26 people will have epilepsy in their lifetime, and 1 in 10 will have a seizure event. So it is a lot more widespread than people realize.
Do you also work with the people who are in those persons' lives to help them manage the new normal?
Absolutely.
What kinds of things do you do for them?
Sure. So we do a lot of advocacy. We'll help them find those resources they need to be a caregiver, to help them help that person with epilepsy. We'll connect people through community events and through support groups. We always think of that new mom and dad who are now finding out their child has seizures. Well, we'd like to connect them to the mom or dad who lived it 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and can connect them and help them find those resources in that. So we do a lot of community events, a lot of support groups for families and caregivers as well.
Now, you said it's an isolating kind of condition. How do you help people navigate that?
We talk about it. We share stories. One of the things we've implemented over the last 2 years is a new podcast, the Electric Avenue Navigating Life with Epilepsy. And this is where people are interviewed and share their stories of how they've overcome, how they live with epilepsy, how they're not afraid to talk about it or worried, and how they let people know it's okay to talk about it so you can get that support group.
Do you find that people still think there's a stigma
Oh, absolutely.
around epilepsy? And if you could change that, what would you do?
Absolutely. One of the big things we do in the community is get out and present on epilepsy, the myths and the facts. And then we also give training on seizure first aid. But one of the things I would do, especially for children in schools, is to make this not such an a scary event, not such a embarrassing event you can imagine. So the more people we know, the more groups in the community that understand that this is not as rare or as that, and not to be as reactive, instead of and be more supportive of when they witness a seizure, or understanding that a seizure is even taking place.
Okay. And there are signs and symptoms that people can look for, but the education piece is what you take care of.
Exactly. And one thing I like to share in that is I was in education for many years, and I was a teacher for many years, and a coach. And one of my avenues into Epilepsy Association was a student athlete. And I can remember vividly looking at them and thinking that, boy, they're daydreaming, boy, they're not listening to me, boy, and then just how I would respond, and then say, wait a minute, and then I come to find out they were having absence seizures, which are short 10-second seizures where someone maybe is, they just are having a moment, and they don't remember it.
Yes. Well, it's wonderful that you took that moment and turned it into a life of educating people. Thank you, David.
Oh, you're welcome.
We will be back with more right after this. Epilepsy is perhaps one of the most misunderstood medical conditions. So we hope after today's show you'll know what to look for, what to do, but more importantly, what not to do if someone is having a seizure. That's part of why we want to be here, to help you maintain your healthy connections.